Billy, let's begin at the beginning. What do you consider the most important fundamentals for bass players?
Well, as ridiculous as it may sound, one thing that is kind of my pet peeve for young bassists coming off and stuff is, believe it or not, the strap length. My strap is just one piece. It doesn't adjust because I know the perfect length for me after 20-some years of playing. You know, that I know it's going to be there. And you notice when I'm practicing, if I'm sitting down, the bass sits right here, and you do all your stuff with it. And when you stand up, it's in the same spot. So you're always used to it being at the same spot on your body. Whether you like it high or low is your own personal preference, but as long as it's on the same spot, if you're practicing and then move, all your angles change, everything moves. So I like to try to encourage people to get that one spot that they're going to put the bass and leave it, and then work on everything from there. So it's just real important for me. I see a lot of players, you know, reaming away in the dressing rooms, get up on stage, and the bass is in a completely different spot, and they can't do it, and they come back, you know, blaming their roadie or their amp or whatever, you know. That's usually, surprisingly enough, just to get your strap in the right spot is really important.
You've mentioned in the past having the fewest possible variables.
Yeah.
This is really an extension of that, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the first variable, really, where the bass is. You know, once it's in position on your body, and then worry about getting your arms close to it, and then you're down to your elbows and wrists, and then eventually to your fingertips. But it all bases up that one solid spot. And it sounds ridiculously stupid and elementary, but it's really important. A lot of people...
Maybe easily ignored, huh?
Yeah, that's probably why. A lot of fundamental things are easily ignored.
What about things like action and the feeling of the fingers on the strings? How should you adjust your action, ideally, for optimum performance?
Well, it's hard for a beginning player because they don't know what's right or wrong yet because they haven't had the experience of doing it. But I generally set my action to the point where it buzzes and then lift it up from there, down to where it buzzes and lift it up from there. If you can get a good repairman, he can hone your neck down and do a job on your frets, so you can get the action really low and have it not buzz at all. But I get it pretty low, and then, again, as I said, raise it up so it's not flopping around and buzzing, because it's a happy medium. You can set up the bass for perfect studio tone where you get no buzz or rattle at all. Or for me, it's pretty ratty all the time because I'm more of a live player, of course, than a studio player. So mine is a little buzzy and rattling, but I personally preferred that because like Chris Squire's tone and Roundabout, it grind and grunge, it's great. You know, that's you know, you hear some character in there, some noise. To me, you know, playing a rock and roll band is about as far from perfection as you could get. So, you know, a little noise actually adds to it, I think.
What about string spacing, the distance between the strings?
Well, it's pretty,
for action.
Usually they're not very adjustable, but I wish companies would stick with standards. There should be a basic Fender and a basic Gibson spacing, because that's the two basses that pretty much started out everything. So as a matter of fact, on this bass here, the Gibson spacing you can see is you know, the strings are outside of its spacing. That's the standard Gibson spacing, where the Fender spacing, where these DiMarzio pickups are made, you know, they're right in on that. So it's a little off on here. But wider spaced strings give your fingers a chance to get in between if you're a finger player. It's real important.
Right. Now, what about string tension itself? How does that affect technique, the tension of the strings?
Well, however tight the strings are determines how much they're going to flap around and buzz on the fretboard. I would discourage anyone from using a real light set of strings because, you know, bass is a real strength instrument. It takes a lot of strength to play it, more so than a guitar. And I prefer to encourage people to put as much into it to get as much out, use a real strength kind of point of view.
Could you tell us a little bit about your development in the early years as a player, what you got from your early influences?
Well, first major influence probably was the Yardbirds, Paul Samwell Smith. So. Great bass solos, great bass tone. I forgot the idea for the EVO style pickup. Super deep low end. I'm a man. Having a rave with the Yardbirds, totally great playing.
One of the early prototype heavy bands too.
Oh yeah, totally great. Real metal, if you wanted to call it that, metal and mono, I guess you'd call it. But it was great. Him, and then you know, the Beatles and all the pop, British Invasion came through all the songs.
McCartney, melodic sense.
Yeah, McCartney's a way overlooked bass player, way underrated. Like, you know, all the Rain stuff, and you know, it's great stuff. really cool. Great tones too. Really built the band. And a lot of what you see now in bass players for the whole song, it just really, bass just wasn't like that back then. Motown, Jamie Jamerson, all over the place. Fundamental element of the song was a bass line.
Right.
Move the whole song. It made the whole song happen. So that's stuff I kind of grew up on, things that really were an important part of the song. Bass parts that were part of the song, not soloing or not just thudding along, eighth notes on the, along with the single disco beat bass drum. There's a lot more happening back then as far as, writing goes. Then I got into Tim Bogart was probably my biggest real big bass influence. Tim Bogart from Vanilla Fudge.
And he influenced you technically too.
Yeah, real technically. He's still my hero. He's the greatest. I got all my raking techniques from him. I think the bass he played on the first Vanilla Fudge record to this day is set the standard for the ability of a bass to move in the context of a song and just take it to places where it just wouldn't have gone without him. It's really incredible. Jack Bruce, Cream, unbelievable. All the live stuff. I just did an interview with him together recently for a magazine cover and for a big article story about bass back then and now. Right. It's real interesting to hear his point of view on three-piece bands and stuff and how much the bass is really a part of things. That's what
you identify a lot with what he said.
Oh, absolutely. That? We were like right on the money. Both kind of same thing. It was pretty cool. And he had a great voice and a great songwriter. Totally amazing. John Entwistle, Chris Squire. You name them.
Did the sound of Roto Sounds come from Chris Squire?
Yeah, Chris Squire. Well, actually, it came more from John Entwistle, I think, for me. But when Chris Squire came out, he popularized it for everybody, that grinding bass tone. Yeah. Totally cool. He was a great player. But a guy in my neighborhood that started me playing bass, Joe Hesse, he actually gave me my first set of Roto Sounds. It was a used set off his bass, and once I tried him, like back in 1971, I think it was, once I put him on, I couldn't try anything else again, so that was how long I've been playing him. So that's kind of where that tone came from. But other than that, Jocko, and then everything, Oscar Peterson piano, I used to listen to a lot. Sonny Rollins, jazz sax player, Herbie Mann.
Yeah. Frank Zappa.
Frank Zappa heavily. All my 7/4 and 5/4, learning odd time signatures, and he was the king of that, so I learned a lot. I can, from memory, sing you, his whole first 10 records, me and Steve Vai on the tour bus on the first Dave tour, we could sing every Frank Zappa song there was, with every little nuance. It was funny. So we learned a lot of that, and it's about everything. Anything in music is an influence.
Including things like Bach even, right?
Yeah, well, Bach I get into real heavily very, very early on, way early 70s, and everybody's like, it's the buzzword now, I listen to classical music, and I'd much rather go listen to something that no one else is listening to, like pedal steel guitar or ethnic music, something that not everybody's into, because as a player, I've always tried to go towards something different than what everyone else was doing, and it's been successful for me so far, so I continue that. Instead of going with how everyone else is being influenced, go somewhere else,